I find that one of the most common questions that I see on Twitter in my own comment section and live streams is people wondering why other people, especially those at tournaments, aren't playing the deck that they like the most. Now, in some cases, I'd say in most cases, the players that are asking these questions do not go to tournaments, and that's perfectly fine, but what they're wondering is why is no one else playing this deck that I think is so cool? And maybe they're not totally in tune to the metagame, but very often they feel that their deck has some sort of edge against other decks, and they're wondering why is no one else playing this strategy. Now, in some cases, it's decks that used to be popular, things like Madolches or Girgia, and in other cases, it's things that were never popular, like Galaxy, but in all these cases, they're usually asking about strategies that are currently not only not seeing tournament success, but in many cases are not even seeing tournament play, even at the lower tables where you see tons of different strategies going on. And sometimes I feel bad about this, and the reason that I feel bad about it is that most competitive players like myself, we have sort of this collection of pet strategies that we keep by our side, not so much to play at competitive tournaments, but just to keep in mind for fun, casual games, or whenever they get support down the line. Some players like Mermails, I'm a big fan of decks like Birds or anything spirit related, but I understand that oftentimes when people ask me the questions that I just talked about, where they're asking why is no one playing these strategies, that not only are those sort of those people's strategies that they like to play, but also they're the only deck that they own, so when they go to tournaments they feel discouraged because no one else is playing their deck and they have no one to strategize with. And I completely get where you're coming from. Oftentimes one of the things that's keeping back a lot of casual strategies from becoming competitive is the very fact that there aren't many people playing those decks, those very specific decks that maybe have a very small following. Therefore, it's really hard for those strategies to actually grow over time because not enough people are play testing them. So at the start of this video, I want to tell you a story about my own experience, and hopefully this will help sort of explain what I'm going to be talking about for the rest of the video. In the case of new Cyber Dragon support that came out in Cybernetic Horizon, if you remember my box opening videos from that set, I said that I actually really did want to play Cyber Dragons, and I fully meant that. In fact, I spent not a ton of money, but a decent amount of money picking up all of the cards for the Cyber Dragon strategy. I had all of them in a deck box, all sleeved up and ready to go. However, when I went to a regional qualifier, which was in Indianapolis, if you remember I played Altergeist at that event, you might realize that I didn't play Cyber Dragons. And you might also realize I have never posted a Cyber Dragon deck profile, and this is sort of the issue with only having a finite number of people playing Yu-Gi-Oh! As well as a finite number of events, because at that Indianapolis regional, I realized that even though I had Cyber Dragons fully built, and even though they're not a terrible deck, and actually at that point they were pretty good, especially when Sky Strikers were with them, I realized that I would never play them at a tournament instead of Altergeist, or instead of Burning Abyss, or instead of any number of other decks. And this is the number one reasons that people do not play your favorite deck, however good or however bad it may be. It's just that you have to remember that no matter how many people there are playing this game, they can only play one deck per event, and some people don't go to as many events as I do. They might only go to like one regional qualifier every couple months, so they have to really choose which deck that they want to play. And if it is a case where the deck isn't as strong as other decks out there and they're only going to one event every couple months, they're going to want to take the best possible deck that they have access to, which oftentimes is not strategies like Birds, like Madolches, like Blackwings. It is more close, not necessarily a meta deck, but at the very least a competent and well-known rogue strategy of that format. If the Cyber Dragon and Altergeist comparison was a little bit too far-fetched to you because those two decks are very different, let's look at it in more of a natural progression. So for example, let's say someone has their hat deck sitting around. Now if you didn't play in 2014, a hat deck is basically just a trap-based strategy using artifacts and trap tricks and hands, and I know that those cards aren't that good, but just stay with me for this. So let's say they have their hat deck sitting around. I know I still have all my cards from 2014, and they want to enter an event, they want to play play a more control-oriented strategy, so they say to themselves, well, why don't I just play Hat? But then they remember that a much more recent strategy that actually got support was Frogs in the form of Totally Awesome, and they're like, okay, maybe I'll play that trap deck, because in pretty much every single way, a Frog deck is going to be more powerful and more successful than a Hat deck. And then when they play Frogs, they might say, well, hold on a second, actually Altergeists aren't that much more expensive. Even if I don't play Infinite Impermanence, it seems like in most cases Altergeists are going to be better than Frogs and definitely better than Hat, so why don't I just play the Altergeist strategy even though I have to buy a few new cards? This is what happens time and time again, because each person out there, I know some people and especially some channels out there really only focus on playing one strategy forever, but I think for many players, we just move on. We just get bored with strategies that we've been playing for 4 years. I'm not saying that I don't like decks that I've played in the past. I still have a soft spot in my heart for decks like Spirits and Volcanics, but I played those decks for a very, very long time, and at this point, even though I might want to break them out for like a regional sometime or maybe a local qualifier sometime, I'm never going to seriously consider them contenders, and honestly, I'd have more fun playing newer strategies that I haven't played before rather than strategies that I've played for months on end. Furthermore, this problem actually becomes amplified when you factor in that many of the players that are playing these weaker strategies are playing them because they're more budget friendly, and in the case of someone on a budget, and I know that I just made a video talking about getting players back into Yu-Gi-Oh, and one of the things that I said in that video was really stay away from decks like Blue Eyes and Red Eyes, and the reason that I said to stay away from them wasn't necessarily just because I thought that they were bad decks or less powerful decks than other decks out there, which is true, but more importantly, the bang to buck that you get with those strategies is so much lower than other decks out there. Sure, you could spend $300 to $400 on a Red Eyes deck, which I know sounds crazy, but really, have you guys looked at the price of some of those Red Eyes cards? They're insane. Or you could spend $100 on a dinosaur deck, save yourself several $100s, and actually have a shot at tournament level success. So for a budget player asking themselves, where should I put my money? Oftentimes you want to make that each dollar go as far as possible, and that means spending it wisely on decks that are both cheap and powerful, not just decks that you like a lot. Now I will say some of the better areas to play those decks that you don't want to actually purchase in real life are places like Yu-Gi-Oh! Pro and Dueling Book. I think that those are awesome sort of avenues for you to play decks like Red Eyes without investing hundreds of dollars into a deck that'll probably never see tournament success. But in general, if we're talking about the physical card game, most people want to spend money on cards that they know are good. To be completely honest, no matter how much you like an archetype, no matter how much you like an individual card, it doesn't feel good to spend money on cards on decks that you know are not very good. And I know that I might sound hypocritical right now as I look at my desk and I have a max rarity Crystal Beast deck on there that's worth 5 times as much as it actually should be, but in general, especially for budget players, they really need their money to go into better places than just pet decks that they know won't be successful at tournaments, especially when it comes time for a regional qualifier and they ask themselves, and I'll just be frank here, would you rather go 2 and 6 with your favorite Red Eyes deck, or would you rather go 6 and 2 with a dinosaur deck that costs half the price? I know some of you listening to this video will say, well, what if I just have the secret sauce for my Red Eyes strategy that no one else has discovered? I'm going to say in 95% of the case, you will not actually have the secret sauce. Oftentimes, and I think that this is something that many players that don't go to tournaments very regularly seem to miss, many competitive players are trying out the cards that aren't actually already in competitive decks. I know that many casual players seem to think that competitive players just look at whatever just topped and then just copy and paste it, but in many cases, competitive players have already tried out really crazy out there cards, but they just don't bring them to tournaments because they didn't see that much success in their play testing. So if you're asking someone, well, what are you going to take to a tournament? The most expensive deck that you have that isn't going to perform well, or the deck that costs way less and might perform well? I would say say in a lot of cases, people are going to choose the deck that at least has a chance of performing well. Now, I know in some cases it is fun just to see your favorite deck do good, but like I said, I think that the time and place for those decks is at like locals or online dueling where there isn't much on the line. And I understand by this point, I'm sure I already have a bunch of comments from people saying that I just want everyone to play meta, but in this video so far, the closest thing to an actual meta deck that I've suggested playing is Altergeist, which is barely just at the very tippy top of Rogue, at the very bottom of meta decks. Mostly I'm just suggesting decks like Dinosaurs instead of decks like Red Eyes. Both those decks are not very popular, but in the case of one of them, Dinosaurs, it actually does have a chance to be successful. You can be successful in Yu-Gi-Oh! Without playing meta, you just have to be smart with your choices. Another interesting variable that I think a lot of people disregard, although I actually feel it's extremely important, is how far, how long, and how much money someone has actually spent to get to the regional or the YCS that they're attending, and how that relates to how serious of a deck they're going to bring. I mean, really think about it. Is someone going to play Red Eyes if they drove 5 hours to a regional qualifier, if they got up at 2 in the morning to shower and get ready, hopefully they shower, and get ready to go to that regional qualifier? Do you think that they're going to bring a deck that they know, even if they got extremely lucky every single round, that they would do very poor with? I don't think so, and actually, as someone who has brought meme decks to many tournaments, the tournament that really made me think about, okay, I can't just bring bad decks to tournaments, was the time that I drove 4 hours to Indianapolis to play FAs, and even though my record wasn't terrible, I think I went 6-3 at that regional, I didn't get an invite, and I had to spend that whole 4-hour trip home asking myself, well, why didn't I just play Frog Paleozoics, a deck that likely would have gotten my invite? And that's sort of the issue that a lot of people face. I would say if someone's only driving 10 minutes to go to the regional qualifier, they are much more inclined to take risky strategies or decks that they don't necessarily think are extremely powerful to those events, because if they lose, if they just totally punt the entire event, well, they can just drive home. It's only 10 minutes. But for someone that has to get up so early in the morning and then drive 4 hours and knows that they have a 4-hour trip at the end of the event as well, they're not going to take decks that they don't think are going to be successful, because it'd just be a waste of their time. Anyway though, hopefully you guys enjoyed today's discussion video. I do just want to say that I know that there are more variables that account for what decks people play than just what I mentioned in this video. I really just want to capture the biggest ones, but obviously you can play or not play any deck for any reason, and I really mean that. Maybe you don't like the artwork, maybe you don't like the playstyle, maybe you just switch decks every single week. Whatever your reasons are, they're perfectly valid. No one is obligated to play or not play a certain strategy. Just because the deck might be an underdog doesn't mean that people have to play it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this slightly different version of a Why Nobody Plays video though. Let me know your thoughts and comments in the comment section below. I'll see you guys later. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.